What's up, everybody? Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we gotta talk about the new agent tier list. As of patch 4.11, we're right in the smack dab center of Champions Tour North America Stage 2. And all of the changes that have been happening over the past 3 months have had time to settle. Things have been moved around, and we are looking at what is the most optimal characters to play at a high level. So we're gonna break it all down so that you know the best characters to play and avoid and why. But the GameLeap website is the best place to dominate and pop off with in-depth agent guides and advanced strategy over every single agent in the entire game. So if you really want to master an agent as quickly as possible, do yourself a favor, go check it out right now down below. Now, first off, we got to talk about the F tier. And there are 2 characters currently in the F tier, even though one of them kind of has an asterisk. First off, we have to talk about Phoenix, who has a 0% pick rate on every map, doesn't see any play. He is unplayable in pro play. Now, that being said, Phoenix is still unplayable in ranked play. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate, but this character is just really underpowered, unfortunately. He is the weakest of all the duelist options, and there's a lot of situations where only one duelist is good enough to see play in a composition. But good news, Phoenix is gonna get a massive buff or some reworks, but bad news is we have no idea when the hell that is. So yeah, in the meantime, stay away from Phoenix. I would just suggest playing something else, because there's a good chance that even if he does get buffed enough to play, he will be so different with the rework that you're not really practicing for Phoenix. It's really hard to predict at this point. So, yeah. But the other character in the F tier that only has a 1% pick rate in pro play, very, very little, is actually Reyna. But there's an asterisk there, because the thing about Reyna is she's S tier in ranked play. We did this in the previous tier list where I actually put her in her own separate tier. But when we're talking about pro play, she's incredibly niche because she doesn't really do almost anything unless she gets kills, which is not really what abilities should be used for, especially in pro play when abilities are trying to set you up for more favorable kills. Because especially when people around you are all of a high mechanical skill set, you don't want to just be relying on this 50-50 gunfight in order to activate yourself. You want to use your abilities in a really smart and great way so that it's not a 50-50 gunfight, so that you have a favorable gunfight, and then you win multiple gunfights because you don't have to keep 50-50 against people that are actually good all the damn time. And yeah, that's also why, even though Reyna is like an S tier ranked character, she is not really a character that you should be hard grinding, because you are basically putting yourself in a situation where it's like, I have to be the best mechanical player in this lobby, and I'll pop off and carry, or I am going to do almost nothing. And I'm gonna have to keep doing that, and keep doing that, and keep doing that, and keep doing that if I want to keep climbing. And you could go up against Smurfs, or you could get to a rank where people are of your mechanical skill level. It's like Reyna is a character built for people that are smurfing more than it's built for people that are actually trying to improve at the game. Now we're gonna move on to D tier, and these are characters that maybe have potential, but right now they are just not showing results. And we have right now 4 characters in the D tier. We have Yoru, right now only has a 1% pick rate in pro play, which is pretty tragic. I do think that Yoru still has potential to grow, and in some other regions he's seeing a little bit more pick rate, but unfortunately in ranked play, he's not replacing any character as the initiator currently. In fact, Raze has picked up a ton of pick rate ever since a lot of the changes in the past have gone through. She's been the de facto initiator, and Yoru not quite strong enough to make a dent, but just like with Reyna, I think that Yoru can be a ranked menace, and unlike Reyna, when you get to Immortal Plus, you could be even more of a ranked menace with Yoru, as opposed to Reyna being someone that, in my opinion, scales off when you get to higher ranks in the game. Now, Fade is in here, and Fade only has a 2% pick rate. In other regions, she was seeing more pick rate, and we took that as a sign that is good, because players don't really know Fade that much. They're not comfortable with her. But it might be that they were also experimenting with her and decided against her. So we don't really know where Fade is gonna move right now. We don't know if players are just unsure and they would rather go with tried and true Sova until they are more confident, or have they already tested Fade and decided that she is not a better or superior alternative to Sova? It's really hard to say at this point. I do think that Fade has a lot of potential, but I also think that many of her abilities are a lot easier to counter than well-used Sova abilities, and maybe when people master her, they can get around that, but at this point, it remains to be seen. Now, unfortunately, Neon's time in the sun was short-lived, and many people believe it was because of the nerf that Riot kind of swept in and hit them with after Optic won the grand finals, or whether it's just that Neon is on the cusp of being really great, but not quite there because she only has a 6% pick rate, and she does see play here and there from some teams, and I do think that she does have more potential to go. But really, a small buff, I think, would be all it would take to push this character to the next tier or even 2 tiers above. That being said, we just saw games with freaking FaZe Clan with Baby Bay running it down with Neon and actually slaughtering everybody. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just you need the right kind of smorg brain to just activate Neon. And she could be just fine in her current state, just looking for the right playstyle to enable her. We're gonna have to keep an eye on Neon, but I still, as a Neon main, give me a little bit of buffs, come on. But last up in the D tier, we gotta talk about Cypher. Now, Cypher sees some play on a select few maps, like, you know, Split and Fracture, but for the most part, Cypher is pretty power crept. Now, that being said, Riot has said multiple times that Cypher is on their radar as a character to potentially buff, and that would be great for you Cypher mains. But as of right now, he's a niche character, if anything. There are very specific maps that he can get value on. And in ranked play, I think that he is still really, really great on Split, and he can be used for retakes on Fracture if you're really disciplined with your camera use and your traps and things like that. But at the end of the day, there are better Sentinel options, and yeah, Cypher is just a little bit underpowered in his current state, even if he has some situations where he's pretty good. Now we're moving on to the C tier, and these are characters that are really strong, but they aren't meta dominant or anything, and there are other alternatives that might get more value. And right now I'm going to talk about 3 characters in the C tier: Astra, Killjoy, and Brimstone. Now, Astra's at 12% and actually quite a bit above Cypher, and Astra's been picking up like little bits of pick rate here and there ever since she got those huge nerfs. Specifically, Split is a place where she sees quite a bit of play, and she sees a little bit of play sometimes on Ascent, sometimes on Bind and Fracture. Now, Astra, unfortunately, is another one of those characters that has the asterisk for the wrong reasons. While Astra is actually seeing a little bit of pro play, she is really, really bad in ranked because there is no coordination, and she's a very hard character to play. This means that even though she is in the C tier for this tier list that's based on pro play, for ranked play, she is probably closer to F tier. And I would think it would need her to be like A or S tier in order for her to be a decent offering in ranked play, just based on the coordination requirement to play the character. Now, next up, we do gotta talk about Killjoy that has an above 50% pick rate on Ascent at a 64%, which is really good, but that's kind of the only map she sees a lot of play on. And Killjoy is good in some ways because on that map, Ascent, she's great for retakes, she's great for locking down sites, but on a lot of maps, she's just weaker to the other Sentinel option, specifically Chamber. You just don't really have as much control with her, and I really think that if they want to boost her pick rates, they need to allow her to be effective quite a bit further away from her utility than she is right now, because she doesn't have a lot of options as far as lurking is concerned. She doesn't have a lot of options as far as, you know, trying to hedge where enemies are pushing. She kind of has to stay on the side that she's set up on, or set up and push where she's at. Her turrets and stuff can't even guard the flank if she's lurking too far away. So as of right now, she's staying in the C tier. Now, last up in the C tier, we do have Brim. Brim is actually pretty good. He sees a lot of play on Bind and Fracture, and I think he's more of a niche map pick than anything. Sees almost no pick rate on all the other maps and has other competition for the smoke roll on those other maps. But on Bind and Fracture, he sees over 70% pick rate each. Now, the difference between Brim and Omen isn't so severe that you're throwing the game by playing Brim on an Omen map, right? But you can't play Brim on a Viper map, and there is more flexible options on Omen on the maps that he's good in, like Haven, Ascent, and Split, versus Brimstone that only has 2 maps he's good in. So for now, he's kind of lost the Dome Smoker controller battle along with Astra compared to Omen, but that doesn't mean that he's unplayable by any means. Now, last up in the C tier, we do got to talk about Sage. Sage is actually the second best Sentinel, which is pretty sad considering she's all the way down here. But she sees pretty good play on Icebox at above 60%. and she sees pretty decent play on Fracture, Bind, and Split as well. Sage is also a really great ranked pick. She has a very high ranked pick rate already, but her kit allows for stalls. The res is still one of the most powerful ultimates in the game, and because Sage can play this flexible role where she's supportive and still can heal herself and be like pseudo aggressive at times, and enables her to potentially fight and then come back to a higher health to fight again. Sage is a pretty balanced character right now. And while Sage is only this high in the North American region, when we go over to the European region, she has a much higher pick rate, like all the way up to A tier. So I think she probably really deserves like the B tier. But for now, I'm putting her here based on the pick rate and NA. But let's actually move on to the B tier, and the B tier has 3 options as well. We have Skye, Raze, and Breach. Now, the thing about Skye is pretty good. On Bind, she sees play. On Split, she sees play. On Haven, she sees play. Doesn't see much play on other maps, but Skye has kind of gotten the short end of the stick in the initiator role, and it's actually not because she's weak. It's because the initiator role is freaking stacked, man. It's crazy stacked. I mean, every single initiator is really strong. When you have Fade on the bench that might see play at some point because she's pretty new, if she sees play, then the initiator role is just mad stacked. So even in a situation where she's kind of on reserve, Skye is only this high, even though she's really great. Now, for ranked play, I also think that Skye's a phenomenal pick, and all in all, especially if you're enabling a duelist with your initiation flashes and things like that, you can make a ton of plays in pro or ranked play as well. So for that reason, I'm putting her all the way up here in the B tier. Now, Raze has become the de facto initiator on the maps that she's played, and she sees almost a freaking 90% pick rate on 2 maps, Split and Bind, and an above 70% pick rate on Fracture. Doesn't see much play on other maps, but on the maps that she's good in, she's fantastic. And I do think that Raze is an amazing character to have in your agent pool for the maps that she gets a lot of value in. For Fracture, being able to aggressively take control of space, retake space, clear areas, there's tons of plant areas that can get so disrupted by a single paint shell. We pop on over to Split, where Raze has just been good there forever because of how effective she takes mid, how great she stops pushes. It's just great for her. And then Bind is another map where Raze can really abuse the teleporters. She's really great at challenging areas like U-Haul and Hookah. All in all, this character is incredibly powerful, and I think she's phenomenal for ranked play as well. The only reason that she's down in the B tier as opposed to something higher is I don't necessarily think that she is optimal to one trick. I think that she's great to have as a character you play like maybe half the time, but I think you need another agent that will fill in the gaps on the maps that Raze isn't most optimal on. So character examples would be like KO or even Jet or freaking Sova. There's a lot of options involved there. And last up, I did want to talk about Breach, who has a really great pick rate all of a sudden, like out of nowhere on Haven with almost an 80% pick rate. Good pick rate on Split as well, and then a maxed out pick rate on Fracture. Breach has kind of just came out of nowhere and really has brought even more competition into the initiator role. I think that Breach is phenomenal, but unfortunately, he's a character that is much better in coordinated play than he will be in ranked play, unless you get a dual partner that combos really well with you or works well with you. Keep in mind that Breach is gonna be phenomenal with any duelist as your duo partner. If you have a Raze that could fly in and you all got the timing right where he doesn't get flash or stunned, but he flies in, you have a Jet, you have freaking, Yoru is insane with Breach, Neon is insane with Breach. There's a lot of characters that can combo really well with him, and I think that he's a great pick to play on the maps that he's really good in, and definitely someone that, if you like the playstyle of him, add him to your agent pool for those maps in particular, especially Fracture. Now, let's move on to the A tier. These are characters that are freaking nasty with it. These are characters that are incredibly powerful, and pretty much you have to know how to play against these characters, or you should have these in your agent pool to give you a more balanced agent pool that fits well into the meta. Now, at the bottom of the A tier, we have KO at almost a 40% pick rate across the board, with Ascent with 70, Breeze with 90, and all the other maps has various pick rates with KO. Now, the KO train has not been stopping. This character has been on a tear, just gaining pick rate after pick rate, and is only priced to get better as the game progresses. Having abilities like KO to turn off enemies' abilities is going to get more and more powerful the more combos are added to the game, the more abilities are added to the game. KO is phenomenal. I really think that the only thing that could stop him from just going on an absolute tear where he slowly eats up pick rate and just gets better and better and better and better is if they introduce another character that does a very similar thing to KO. That's the only thing I could think of, because KO's just freaking nuts. His abilities are nuts. And I think something that's really underrated on the character is his flashes. Master his flash and you are an absolute menace. And one of the things that you can do with KO's flash is pop flash out of smokes. If enemies like smoke a choke point, any choke point, you alone, or you could even set it up with your team or just a duo partner, you go into the smoke and you pop flash out of it. If enemies are just staring at the smoke, which a lot of them will be doing because they're trying to wait for you to peek out and kill you, and if they're playing like an off angle in the open, you pop flash out, they are freaking dead. Like, there's no reaction if you do it right, where the flash just pops out of the smoke as it pops. There's no reaction. Like, they're just dead. And then you could pop flash around door frames, and you master his flash, and it's the best flash in the game, and it's not even freaking close. Now, of course, we do got to talk about Omen. Omen that had 42% pick rate, and as far as dome smokers are concerned, and remember, dome smokers are smokes that are spherical, and they can cover, like, targeted choke points, and Omen has a 42% pick rate, seeing a ton of pick rate. I mean, he is the king of dome smokers right now. 80% on Haven, 80% on Ascent, over 50 on Split. He is really, really strong, and he pretty much sees play on all the maps where either one, Brimstone isn't slightly better, so like Bind and Fracture, Brimstone is slightly favored on those maps, specifically Fracture, Brimstone is very favored. And then when we talk about the maps like Icebox and Breeze, where Viper is more favored because you have long sight lines where dome smokers just won't cut it. So Omen and Viper are actually at a nice parity where they both have about 40% pick rate, and they are just good on different maps. And it's kind of weird in a situation where having a controller pool of Viper, Omen, and Brim just fills out every need that you would have. I think that you could really just have an agent pool with Viper and Omen and be a little bit more targeted and honed in. But ultimately, there are different selections on different maps, and I think the controller role is pretty competitive. But if they added one more line smoker like Viper to the pool, it would probably be more balanced altogether, but that's about the only thing they could do. Now, we do got to talk about the S tier characters. These are the top 3 most picked characters in the game, and there's not that much surprise here, because first off, we got to talk about Jett. The nerfs didn't keep her down for long. Jett is dominant on Haven, Icebox, Ascent, and Breeze. Is pretty bad on Split, Bind, and Fracture, but there are either initiators that see play and solo duelists that see play. So for instance, Breach and Raze are really good on those maps for the most part, and there's other characters like Sky that's good on Bind, and that just eats away some of the pick rate of some of the duelists that could be ran. But on those 4 maps that I listed, Jett is just freaking nuts. In ranked play, we already know that she's dominant. But the true key to playing Jett now is you have to have game sense. You have to have a little bit of a brain. You have to think about how you're going to challenge an angle, when you're going to activate that dash. But most of the time, especially on maps where you don't necessarily know where enemies are, you're trying to use that in situations where you're likely to come up against conflict when you're trying to take control. You're holding an angle or you're pushing an angle, you activate it, and then you could use it to initiate in the same way that you did before, where you prime it, dash into your own smoke. But when you're on defense, what you do is you aggressively challenge angles with the intent of, taking that duel and flying away. And if enemies aren't there, you do lose out on that value, but it's up to you to decide when you're taking what duel, when you're challenging what area. And the fact that she still sees this much pick rate post nerfs probably tells you that the nerfs were fine to add into the game. Now, let's talk about Sova. Sova is also a character that sees play on those same 4 maps at 60% pick rate. He does see a little bit of pick on Bind as well, but no pick rate on Split, no pick rate on Fracture. And Sova's really strong. He's just really, really great. And we all were like afraid for Sova's freaking, pick rate after he got a slight nerf. Fade was introduced, but with Fade not quite cementing herself yet, and maybe never will, we'll have to wait and see, Sova is still a really great pick. And honestly, even if Fade becomes dominant, I don't see a world where Sova falls out of the meta or isn't incredibly strong. So don't feel like you have to stop grinding this character. In fact, I think he's, just as good now as he's been for most metas. Now we do got to talk about the elephant in the room, and yeah, it's just Chamber. Come on. Besides Ascent, he's just, seeing a crazy amount of pick rate. It's nuts. He's absolutely dominant, and I wanted to briefly explain why he's so good. Because when you have a chamber that has a trip on a certain point, and you're holding a aggressive angle, locking down space on another, you have so much map control. And Chamber can get a kill and get out in a way that no other character can. He can post up and control an entire side of the map. So really, when Chamber pushes up and has that control, he has that trap in mid, you can highly leverage that by stacking towards another area. This allows you and your team to kind of unfairly stack certain areas because Chamber can potentially get a kill, get out, locks down multiple sight lines, locks down multiple areas on the map, and your team is just stacked on the other side. So if the enemies want to push there, all of a sudden they're at a huge disadvantage. Now this does require your Chamber to not throw, but as a Chamber yourself, this is what is expected of you, to be able to control whole areas and utilizing that gunplay to lock enemies down. Now, a lot of Chambers come to me and ask, okay, then what do I do on attack? Because I understand on defense, I need to, control areas on the map and keep map control, but what about attack? Well, unfortunately, as Chamber, you're not really good at going in with your team. You're actually really freaking bad at going in with your team, but you are great at lurking. Chamber's a fantastic lurk character, and that gives you more opportunities to cut off enemies when they're, rotating through mid. You could still dip out with your tellies. You're able to actually get a lot of kills this way, and between being like a lurk menace and being someone that can allow your team to play extra greedy on defense as far as what sites they're stacking, and then just in ranked play, being able to just abuse weapons on pistol and your op and whatever the case may be. Chamber's nuts. He's dominant. Learn how to play against him. Take note of the strategies that good Chambers are using when you're up against him. And keep in mind that you're going to have a Chamber pretty much against you in every game. So if you don't know what to do against him, you're probably going to freaking lose. But the GameLeap website is the best place to pop off on any of these agents with tip, tricks, guides, and so much about how to dominate this meta. So if you really want to get a leg up on your competition, do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below.